This is a 2002 Polaris Scrambler 400 4x4. Got this thing for $900. The owner said it was last driven 5 years ago. It was stored in a barn since then. It does not run or drive. The neutral light does come on. Rear light looks like it's working. Oh, those are even working. Let's see. Does turn over pretty good. Alright, does not fire. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of oil in there. Oh yeah, perfect. Looks okay. Pull that through. Look at that plug. Oh yeah, we've got spark. Not quite 120. Oh boy. Pilot. Really heavily clogged. And now I got back home after probably a 10-minute ride from my land, and it's puffing out white smoke again. We're back with the 2002 Polaris Scrambler 400 4x4. Last video, we picked this thing up for $900. Owner said it sat 5 years, and he said before he put this away, it actually did run. He took it back out after the 5 years trying to get it to run, and he said he couldn't, so that's why he sold it to me. I got back home, and we kind of checked through the whole machine, making sure everything was good. Had good spark. Compression was 110, which is pretty low, but it would still run at 110. The carburetor went through, and the pilot jet was actually clogged. So we put everything back together, and actually got this thing to start up for a couple seconds. Then it would die. And then we blow off the plug, and put it back in, and it would start up for a couple seconds, and die. So we kept on finding out that the plug was super wet at the tip. Almost looked like water was on the tip of the plug. So I thought the crankcase was full of water from sitting. We just tried to run this thing as long as possible, trying to clear out that water in the crankcase. And eventually it started up, idled, ran good. So we took it to the land for a test drive, and it ran good for about an hour. No issues whatsoever. Got back home, tried to start it, which was only like 10 minutes after riding it, and it was blowing a ton of white smoke. And it was doing the same thing as before. You try to start it, it would start up for a couple seconds, and then die. And then you have to blow off the plug and do the same thing over and over, and it would just start up for a couple seconds, die. So the plug continued to look wet, like water was on the plug. So I'm thinking that there's either like a hairline crack in the cylinder, allowing coolant into the cylinder, and it's burning off coolant, or the head gasket's blown. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So today's goal is to try to figure out what's going on with this thing. All right, let's see if she fires up. All right, that's what it's doing. You can see the white smoke puffing out. It starts up and then just dies. And then we'll take the plug out and it will be super wet. So we're gonna try to fire it up again, and you'll see that it does not. So that's the problem we're having. All right, so what we're gonna do is get to that plug. Yeah, look how wet that plug is. Just sopping wet. And to me it looks like water on the tip of it. So I'm thinking coolant's getting into the cylinder somehow. So, not good. So one of the signs of a blown head gasket is going to be pressurized coolant coming from the radiator. So with a blown head gasket, coolant can flow directly into the cylinder. And because of that, compression can flow from the cylinder into the cooling lines and into the radiator. So it actually pressurizes the system. So as you crank it over, that compression releases through the radiator here. So as we turn this engine over, we should see coolant popping up out of the radiator because it would be pressurizing this radiator here. If it is a blown head gasket. So let's see. Not seeing any of that. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's pressurizing the radiator at all. Alright, got the seat off, the air box off, the gas tank off, the plastics off. So we're down to the cylinder now. Let's do a quick compression test. See where we're at. Let's just see what we get here. Last time we checked, we were right around 100 psi. So throttle open, twist the key. See what we get. Right around 110 psi, so compression stayed about the same. When we put oil down it, it jumped up to like 170. So I think the rings are probably toast as well. Alright, so that's the compression check. I think we're going to do a leak down test next. Alright, you can see we got the header pipe off. We're going to put this plug in to the pipe to seal that off of there. So let's do that. Hopefully it fits. Oh yeah. And then what we do is we just tighten that nut. And that expands that rubber. So it seals off that exhaust port. There you go, that's pretty tight. All right, we got the carburetor off. So into the boot we're going to put the gauge. Let's see what size it is. I think we can make that one work. See, loosen that up a bit. And we're going to put like 10 psi in here. I don't see it leaking from the head gasket at all. You can see the gauge slowly going down, so it's leaking. But I'm not seeing any bubbles from the head gasket area. Nothing from the radiator. Let's see if there's any bubbles coming from here. Oh, I see a little leak right there. There's a big bubble forming down here. So it looks like there's one from the manifold here. There's bubbles forming down there. Oh yeah. Definitely a leak from the manifold. Big bubble forming. So a leak down test found a leak by the manifold at the bottom. I'm guessing that gasket is ripped or broken. But it didn't show anything around the head gasket. So I don't know if it is the head gasket. Plus we don't see anything coming up from the radiator when air is down there. So I'm kind of leaning towards not head gasket. The only other way coolant could get into the engine would be a cracked cylinder, but still you'd see bubbles in the radiator. Or the water pump seals could be leaking into the counterbalance gear and through those bearings there, or through that seal. So to check the counterbalance oil, there's a plug right here we can take out. And if that's white, we know that the water pump seals are leaking, and most likely leaking into the crankcase. Let's see if this oil's white. Ooh, it's really rusty. Smells horrible. So I think there's a drain for it too. We can try to drain it. But I don't think there's anything in here. Yeah. That's kind of the color that was on the plug though. So I wonder if water's in there or coolant's in there mixing with the oil. Alright, so counterbalance gear oil, that's where you fill it up. Where you drain it, we gotta take off the skid plate. Let's see if I can show you guys where it is. So right up there, that bolt. Alright, we took off that bolt, nothing drained out of there. Nothing at all. So it was empty, which is not good. That should have oil in it. So, where did that go? Let's see if we crank this thing over, if any coolant gets in there and starts pouring out. I wonder if it burned all off. Alright, we went ahead and filled up the counterbalance shaft oil. So that's all filled up, ready to go. What we're going to do is try to run this machine and then drain the oil again and see if that's milky. If it's milky, we know that the coolant's getting in the oil there and probably burning off in the cylinder. We're going to keep an eye on the level of the coolant as well, and we'll see if anything's bubbling up through there, the radiator. Alright, now this thing won't even start up. So we're draining the oil right now. And check that out. Milky. Look at that. So that's definitely mixing with coolant. I think we found your problem. Look at that. So I think the water pump seals are shot. Alright, there's the oil. You can see the water in there. Alright, let's take off this cover first. Somebody was definitely in here before. There's a gasket maker everywhere. Oh man, is that rusty behind there? Holy cow. Look at that oil dripping down there. So that oil we put in the case here is dripping out through here. Look at that. So one of these seals is bad. Guessing the water pump seal and the counterbalance gear seal. Now we can zip this off and try to get this flywheel off of here. There's that nut, there's that washer. That looks like that's gonna be stuck on there pretty good. Alright, we got the puller in there. Let's see if we can crank it off here. Can't believe that came off. Alright, yeah, you can see all the oil leaking in. So, it looks like it's leaking down here. So that's why that was out of oil. It's leaking all over the place. Trying to see where it's coming from. So anyway, the stator comes off. You can see the arrow mark right there. It's going to be lined up with a mark underneath that screw. So we can get that whole stator off. Missing one of the bolts for the starter. Here's the Bendix gear. Alright. Get these screws out. Put the stator. Those were pretty stuck on there. Had to use the little impact. Let's see if that stator can come out. There we go. I'm just gonna put that off to the side. Now there's a little collar. It requires a special tool. Alright, the only tool I have is this one, and it doesn't fit over that. So we need to order up that special tool to crank that off. I tried hammering on it, and it doesn't work, but check this out. Why is there so much play in the crankshaft? That's not looking good. Look at that. That seal is completely shot. I think that's where that oil is coming from. That is absolutely horrible. I don't like that. All right, let's zip this head off of here. It's a coolant pouring out. Yeah, you can see a bunch of water was up in here. Head doesn't look bad though. Head gasket. I don't really see any fill marks. So I'm not seeing any cracking in the head yet. Looking for hairline cracks. Looks pretty good. Alright, cylinder nuts are off. Let's see if we can get the cylinder off here. Oh, it's coming. Coolant line's holding it on. Come on. Looks like the oil line's holding it down. I think we got her. Let's see. Maybe not. Finally off. Alright, that's what the piston looks like here. Yeah, you can see all that brown in there. That was coming up through the crankcase. So we'll get that piston off and see what the rings look like. Alright, so rod bearing, there's absolutely zero play up and down, just a little side to side here. But there's a ton of liquid down there. I don't know what kind of, see it in there, sloshing around. So it was just pouring in through there. And every time you would rotate the engine, that liquid, which is probably coolant and oil mix, comes up to the spark plug and prevents it from sparking. Look at that. Tons of it in there. So that's why it was smoking white and only running for a couple seconds. That's awful. Alright, here's the cylinder. No scratches on the cylinder at all. But you can see again, a bunch of sludge around everything. I tipped it on its side and a bunch of stuff came out of it. So it was really kicking that stuff up. Here's the piston. ART piston, so ART. Yeah, look at all this sludgy stuff coming off of it. Pretty gross. And here's the head. So I wasn't able to find any cracks in the head or the cylinder. Everything looked good. So no cracks anywhere. So I don't think that was the problem. Alright, quick check the ring gap here. Here's the bearing. Just caked full of stuff. Alright, first ring. Alright, there's a little T marking up, so that ring was on correctly. Yeah, ring gap's huge. Right there. So that's why I had lower compression. Let's see what the second ring gap is at. It's gotta be at least 60 thousandths. Yeah, second ring gap is pretty big. Not as big as the first, but still way bigger than that should be. So definitely needs a new top end here. Piston's not cracked at all. And then we found out with the leak down tester that it was leaking from down here. So this thing needs new gaskets as well. But yeah, it's getting sludge, a watery, oily mix. I'm guessing from that counterbalance seal. We're gonna try to get this engine out of the frame so we can work on it a little bit easier and get this thing split and see what's going on. So let's get some of these plastics off. We have to get the clutch off. Get this clutch cover off of here. There's one down here, yeah. Look at all that in the belt or the clutch. That's crazy. Lots of dust in there. I'm getting this primary off first. All right, hopefully this air impact can take it off. We'll find out right now. No problem. All right, now we need to find the puller for that clutch. I think that one's gonna work. Let's see. Popped off. It didn't want to. Finally got her to come. Ooh. I think that bearing in there is shot. It doesn't spin at all. Yeah, that's supposed to spin, I believe, in there. So that's probably not good. But no wear over here at all. Doesn't look horrible. Let's check out the belt. belt was pretty loose on there to begin with. Should have been a little bit tighter. Yeah, it's definitely worn out. HP 2003 belt on there. You can see it's getting chewed up right here. And that's probably because that bearing in the clutch isn't moving at all. But you can see the dryness on the belt there. Yeah, it's just pretty worn out. You can see it coming through there. So a good idea to replace the belt. Yeah. Zip right off. You've got your bolt, washer, and then that washer spacer. This should pull right off. Oh yeah, nice. Got our plastic in the way. All right, now we should be able to get this off. There we go. Secondary looks pretty good. Now we can get this cover off. There's a couple small screws here. Those have Loctite on them. One more bolt holding it down there. Alright, so once you get the clutch cover off there, you can have access to the starter. So that's how you replace the starter right here. 2 bolts, pull that out. We'll do that quick. A lot of times these starters on the Polaris just fail. So that's pretty easy fix. Take off the cover, take off both clutches, and then you have to take off the cover over here on the right side, and then you can replace that starter. A little bit tedious, but not horrible. And it looks like there's just one mount here that needs to be taken off. It looks like right here. That's actually attached to the transmission part of it. I don't think there's anything on the other side. Everything's so dirty. The engine here. There. Now that can back off there. So we're on the right side and you can see the engine mount right there. So that nut is holding everything on there. All right, we got the mount off over here. Now we have to get this coolant line off. Let's see. This coolant's gonna drain. Alright, cool. There's one line holding on right here. the oil line. It's dripping all over the place. We are free. Let's see, we've got the stator wire here. Stator wire goes up right over to here. Disconnect that one. 3 wires going in. Yellow one goes right next to the yellow and red one there. That one's disconnected. And you've got the yellow and red. And then you've got one over here. And that looks like it goes to the ground on the coil. Alright, all the stator wires are off. Take that off quick. So on the starter, we disconnected the wire going to the starter. That goes up through the engine, up to the solenoid. Alright. Now the starter should pull out of here. There we go. Just like that. This to come off and pull through like that. Zip these guys off. Plate will come off like that. Ooh, look how rusty that is in there. That doesn't look too good. Surprised that wire even moves. Wow. Like that. Pump is extremely rusty in there. Alright, that'll pull through. That's it, that's the whole engine. That's the bottom end, it's tiny. It is really small. Here are all the parts laid out on the bench. So it's really not that bad. Here's the cylinder. So to get that engine out is probably a 45-minute job. Really not bad. Alright, so the stator can fall down. And we just ordered up that tool to get that nut off of there. Alright, here's the special tool for that nut on there. So you need it pretty long because this has to fit over the crankshaft there. See how it locks in place? And then you've got the end like that for the impact. But this tool was like 40 bucks on Amazon. So they weren't too bad. Let's see if it'll take it off. Reverse thread. So that tool worked out great. Definitely worth the investment because you're going to be fighting that nut the whole time. Spend the 30, 40 bucks and make it easy. Alright, so now this whole cover piece should come off pretty easily. wonder what these seals look like. Alright, I think that's pretty much everything on that end. Then there's this bracket. It needs to come off. So all these bolts, this bracket's holding this piece together and that piece together. You can see that split in there. Oh, look at that bearing in there. Wow. Just gone. Wait until you guys see that. That is, wow. Here's the back side of that bearing. Yeah, she's toast. Look at this. How is that even working? That's insane. I didn't hear any noises from the engine at all. Look at this. What in the world is going on? Bearing just fell apart completely. Yeah, look at that seal. Junk. Oh. I've never seen the bearing race just come out like that on a running and driving machine. This machine didn't make any weird noises. I don't know how that's even possible. I was not expecting that. Here is the impeller, the water pump here. That's still working, still connected there. There's a lot of play in that crank there. Quick take a look at this side here. So here's the seal. And you can see the seal is completely gone. It's just the outer layer of the seal. It's not even the full seal that's in there. So that definitely failed. Look at that. So the bearing must have chewed that all up. The seal's just like half gone. Gasket's really rusty. Look how much rust is in there. It's really bad. Way worse than I expected. I believe how bad this is. Alright, we've got the little nut. We've got a lock washer. Looks like a normal washer on there too. And then this can slide off. Just like that. And those are where your seals are in there. I don't know how you get that off of there. Here and right down here. See if we can zip those off. I don't know what size those are. Let's see. 10 millimeter. If the dots were lined up, there's a dot on that gear and a dot on that gear. You can see dot there, those were lined up. There's a couple bolts holding this together. More, there's one more down here. 10 millimeter. I think that's all of them. All right, just hammer away and we'll see if she wants to split here. Oh, there she comes. Looks like it's holding on over here by something. I think we can actually take this gear off. This piece was on here like that. So there's a little cutout part right here on this face that actually goes towards the gear and pulls off with the flat side. And there's like a little O-ring gasket here. I think this gear can come off of here, pretty sure. It looks like it wants to. There's that gear. So, and a little washer. Look how rusty. That's going down that way. You've got your main crank seal there. Oh, that's terrible. That was leaking too. I'll show you guys that in a second here. Look at that play in there. You can see the cracks. Yeah, that was shot too. There we go. Yeah, that was on there pretty good. We'll order up a new woodruff key for it too. Oh, finally. Case is split. Look how rusty everything is. Here's the counterbalance. Oh, the bearings in there, horrible. What the heck? So there's supposed to be a seal in there too. Yeah, that seal is just junk. Look at that bearing. Oh yeah, it's toast. Wow, this was horrible. I've never had a running and driving quad that looked this bad on the inside. That is absolutely horrible. Look at the counterbalance bearing. Oh. Every bearing is toast. Oh man, is that bad. Look at that bearing. It's all rust. Looks like you've got the original crank in there. It's made in Japan. Wow. Still doesn't want to come. There we go. Oh. Crank is out. So there's a washer on the inside. I don't know if that was supposed to be there or not. Yeah, crank bearing. Doesn't sound the greatest. I think a lot of water was in there. Seal doesn't look very good either. I am really surprised this thing ran as good as it did. I think if we would have rode it any longer, it probably would have just wrecked the whole engine. Because that bearing that we found that was just totally disintegrated, we have ended up everywhere. And this bearing was about to go too. Alright, so this is the whole reason we tore this thing apart. We figured the seal on the counterbalance shaft was leaking into the engine, causing it to smoke. So let's try to get this apart. I think this will come off the shaft here. Can't tell if that's coming or not. Must be. Seal doesn't look that bad, but that's got to be pretty brittle. And you can see all the rust behind there. The bearing, on the other hand, is toast. Yeah, tons of water was getting behind there. So, I don't know if that bearing's gonna come off. It's completely rusted on that shaft. Hell, that shaft is so rusty. Look at that bearing. It barely spins. That is unbelievable. Is this gonna come off or not? Alright, so I'm pretty sure this gear is pressed onto this counterbalance shaft. So let's see if we can get this off with a puller. Let's see. Alright, gear is off. I have to clean up those threads a little bit. Alright, here's the gear. I mean, it's just packed full of rust. And here's the counterbalance shaft. Listen to that bearing in there. Oh. Bearing's just shot. That is really bad. It's just stuck in that bearing. Just rusted in. There's no seal here. I don't think there's meant to be. But if coolant was at all in here, it would seep right through that bearing. Right, this is a little O-ring behind it as well on there. And pop out this seal. Like, wasn't really on there too good. Yeah, I think that failed. Oh, look at that bearing. That's the main crank bearing. Yeah, toast. Alright, here's the other half of the crankcase here. Let's see what this seal looks like. We'll pop that out. This one was on there a little bit better. There we go. But you can see the corrosion that was on there. And yeah, it was so hardened up. Then the other main crank bearing. This one doesn't feel as bad, but there's no lubrication in there. The shaft that goes to the pump is spinning. That is good. That feels pretty smooth. So I'm guessing that pump was working. And there was oil at the tip of that. But here is the crank. See, pretty rusty. That's what was all over the plug when we took the plug out to look at it. But the rod bearing, zero up and down play. Little side to side. It's not super excessive. So luckily the crank is fine. Doesn't look horrible. All the threads on the end are good. We'll clean up that shaft. But yeah, that doesn't look too bad. So you can see that seal was doing nothing. CYB manifold was leaking. Wonder if it's ripped. Either that or the gasket gave out. I don't think this thing was ever rebuilt before. Where the oil comes in, there's a little hole right there, if you guys can see it, coming in from that port into there. So oil squirts into the carb from right there. That looks pretty good. What this looks like. It's on there pretty tight. Reeds look really good. No gaps at all. So reeds definitely check out. I think the problem was from here, this area right here, you can see some wear to here. Because this manifold right here is pretty hardened up. So I think that is where the air leak was coming from. Doesn't look horrible. Not too bad. The cylinder looks good, but definitely needs a hone job. You can see all the gunk built up in the exhaust port. All that stuff that was burning off in there. Look at all that. Nasty. It's like slimy. Water, oil, gas mix. It's not good. Yeah, look at all that. It's like a paste. We're going to order up some parts now for this thing. Obviously it's going to need a lot of parts and a lot of work and labor to get this thing back to where it needs to be. But it shouldn't be too bad. I've done worse. So that's the plan for next video. We'll order up the parts, get this thing back together, and hopefully have a decent running machine by the end of that video. I hope you guys enjoyed picking this thing up for 900 bucks. Diagnosing it, tearing it down, and finding the problem with this machine, which with this one, it was a bunch of different things. All the bearings were junk, seals were all junk, so everything was leaking into the crankcase, causing it to smoke like crazy. And honestly, it wasn't even underpowered, it was just smoking a ton. So the piston somehow held up mostly, the ring somewhat held up, and the crank held up, which was the main part. So it shouldn't be too expensive to rebuild, but it's still going to be pretty costly. And I don't know if the seller knew about it or not. He said this thing was running and driving good 5 years ago. It was parked in the barn. He tried to take it out and fix it, and he couldn't. That's all he knew about it. So that's the name of the game, picking up these used machines on Facebook. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and this one, I think we lost big time. But that's okay, it's still fun. And a good learning experience. And hopefully you guys learned something too with me tearing this thing down. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing. Stay tuned for next video. And until next time, we are out.